Good afternoon, and welcome to part 5 of our My Embroidery Slow Stitching Journal Stitch Along. Hi, this is Captain Stitches, and I'm Jean. And today I am going to be teaching 5 more embroidery stitches. Yes, 5, but I promise you they're not too difficult and are not going to take too long, but 5 more embroidery stitches. And we are also going to be going over some of the decorative stitches used on some slow stitching pages that I have to share with you. And we will be going over the page layouts first and then teaching the embroidery stitches. And as you all know, when I refer to the page numbers for the embroidery stitches, it is from this there's 2 different covers on it, the exact same book and the exact same pages, but we are using this hand embroidery stitches at a glance little pocket carry along reference guide that is a really great reference, and that is what I am using, and some of you have, and that is the page numbers that I refer to for what the stitches on that we are learning. So we'll set that to the side. And let's go ahead and go over some of the page layouts, which of course you recognize this one. This is the cover of one of my slow stitching journals for the My Embroidery Slow Stitch Journal. And I just wanted to share some of the stitches that I have used on the cover of this to give you some inspiration and some ideas. But first of all, of course, the basting of it is just done, and part of that is still in here. If I can get that up there. Well, you can't see the thread because it's in white blending in, but it's just a running stitch. Maybe you can see it over there on the pink, but yes, that is just a running stitch. That is the basting stitch. So that is what that is. For the wording, that is just a simple back stitch that I used for that, and for the little tag down here that says Captain Stitches 2025. And then on here, we have Lazy Daisy stitches that are on the blue, and up on the green there. They're a little hard to see, the green and green, but that is just a chain stitch going around there. And the decorative rickrack is just done with a running stitch to attach that on there. Up here we have some little stitches that are following in the pattern that is in the actual fabric. There were little small dots on there, so that's just little stitches there. We have some French knots on dots that were in the fabric on there, so just kind of letting the fabric sometimes telling us what to do for our decorative stitching. I haven't done anything down in this part yet, but this was the oh, forgot the name of that stitch. Let me look real quick. Oh, it's the interlaced stitch right here. And that's a little hard to see because it's real fine. And I'm actually going to do something different there because that did not show up as well as I thought it would. It should have been a thicker thread. So we'll be going over that to do something that's going to show up better there. And then down in this pink one, this is just seed stitch, and that is going to be filling up that whole entire area. But that is the stitches that have been used on this one so far. And this little patch underneath the butterfly is just got running stitches going around it to hold it down because the butterfly pretty much covers that up. But then, just to give an idea on another page layout, we did go over this one last time. and I only have that with the glue tack down. It is not basted or anything yet. I have not found the opportunity to be able to work on that. But so that has to be stitched yet. But we did do another page layout in here to give you some more ideas. I love fabrics that have words on them. So that is going down there. We have the center part of an old doily cut out and added on here. There will probably be something, some um, embroidery work that will be added in here or up in this area, little ones, to give this some more interest. But and it looks like I don't have the focus fabric on here, but I do. It's just this little strip down here, and I'll show you why I use that. I just wanted some of it to be in each page, and I loved, this is actually the selvage, and it has the little houses in the different colors that are used in that fabric. So I thought that was really cute, and I used that portion on there. And this is a braid that is being used for embellishment there. So yeah, no stitching done on that one either. It's just the little glue stick tack, so holding that on there for the time being. And just as a reminder, don't forget that when you're doing that, if you have to set it aside, take a picture of your page layout with your camera. So if things get moved around and out of place before you get a chance to either glue base them or base them down, you will remember what you had in mind for your page and can place it back in order that way. But that is what we have going on in that one. We will set that off to the side. And here we have a few older pages that aren't in a book yet. And this first one is, let me see if I can zoom in one more here. Okay, wrong camera. There we go. That'll help a little. But this is a fall layout. It's and this was a rubber stamp, and this was a rubber stamp that I just stamped on the fabric. It says fall is here, and that is just stitched again with a back stitch to embellish that. A little piece of raffia tied in a bow and just stitched on there. This is a leftover piece of wool and a little decorative button, and did lazy daisy stitches around that, and the button sewn down, that, and the embroidery is all that is holding that piece down on there. And then this on this stamp, which is the pumpkin, as you can see, that is part of the stamp there. And I did the embroidery stitches on all the little flowers that were included in that stamp. So we have the actual pumpkin itself is done in very tiny chain stitch. All the orange parts of the pumpkin. The stem is also done in chain stitch, and then the little curly cues on the stem are done with a back stitch. And the flowers here, the yellow ones, and these leaves are done with a lazy daisy stitch. This is the roses are done with a bullion stitch. We haven't learned that one yet. That's coming. And then these little flowers down here are done with small French knots. And these leaves right here are actually done with a stem stitch. So that is the stitching that is on that. And then when you look at the fabrics that are in the background, sometimes looking at what is actually on your fabric will help tell you or give you ideas on what to stitch. So we've got the big squares in the homespun fabric on here. So I just did a cross stitch on some of those. On this fabric, there were diagonal lines going through that. So I just did, it's actually a back stitch on those diagonal lines with a variegated thread. This one has blanket stitch. Oops, can't see that too well. That has blanket stitch going all the way around it. And this one has small running stitches going through it. You can just barely see them. It's a real fine thread, but that's what's holding that on top of that. And this is a piece of a doily, and it's just stitched down with some running stitches. And then the patch that's underneath it is put on with a back stitch. The fabric that is in the background here just has running stitches going through it. And then this plaid up here has back stitch going on some of the lines that were, oops, sorry. It would help if that was in view as I'm talking about that, right? But it just has back stitch going through some of the lines that were on the fabric. And then to hold these layers together, that is done with a blanket stitch all the way around, because this is actually a double-sided page. It was when I was doing some of the seasons. And on the other side is a Christmas one. And that is strips of fabric forming a Christmas tree. We even have our Christmas tree skirt under there. That's done with part of a doily. Our star on top of our tree is cut out of an old doily. And then we have, on this one, we have embellished with two different size pearls that have been stitched down. And that's just done with like a straight stitch, running stitch, just adding the pearls as you go. This fabric had kind of a metallic print in it. So all of those little silver dots that you see are French knots, and the little snowflakes on here actually have the French knots that are on those as well. So that's doesn't really show up too much, but everything that's looking white on there, that is actually silver metallic thread, and those are all French knots. And the star is actually also stitched down with that same silver metallic thread. And then we have a chain stitch that is going through here to hold that decorative lace down. This right here and down here is actually a yarn. It is a type of fun fur yarn in the green. So it kind of brought some life to the Christmas tree using that. And it is stitched down with, it is actually couched down on there. And then this, to make it look like there's a garland on the tree, is beadwork. It's just two pearls with a red seed bead in between them. And that looks like the garland on the tree. And then we have more beads going down through there. And we've got the little silver fabric with the rickrack on it. So it looks like there is a package underneath the tree. We have a little bow on some homespun here to make that look like another package. And that's also some leftover yarn. And then we have cut the doily here so that it looks like the tree skirt, and then it is held down with beadwork also. All that red is beads sewn on there. And then on the bottom of it, we have used beads that have letters on them, and it says Merry Christmas on the bottom there, if you can see that. And then we also have a metallic thread going all the way through here, echoing the tree skirt, and that's just done in a straight stitch, and it goes all the way around there. So that is what is holding the two red fabrics on. And we've also got our little tree trunk there. And then again, there is that, which that is just one blanket stitch that goes all the way around when you have finished both of your pages, and that's what finishes the edge off and holds those together. So that may give you some ideas on some of the decorative embroidery stitching to do on some of your pages. Here is one that is very simple. It's just a bunch of blue squares of fabric for the background. We're still working on it, by the way. The needle is right there with the thread on it. And then these are just little squares that are cut. And what gives them, to make them look like flowers, is just doing a of random stitching on them. If you can see how this one is pretty much done. It's got all the little things going out on it, and that will give it the look of that those are little flowers on there when they're just little squares of fabric. And it doesn't really have much work done in the background yet on that one. That's one that is still a work in progress, but that gives you some ideas also on things that can be done. And then this is one that's done in neutral colors. And let me see what we have done with this one. It has been a while, but this one is just echo stitching with a running stitch going all the way around that leaf, and the bow that is formed again with raffia. Just form a bow, stitch that down, and then to get this to stay, that has been just some running stitches through that to hold that down. Our leaf is sewn with a stem stitch going all the way around it, and then on the inside of the leaf we have done fly stitches to give the texture of the leaf on that, and that leaf was cut out of fabric. So that is how that portion is done. We have a piece of lace here. It's attached with just some running stitches, and then it's got a blanket stitch on the top of it. That's just one piece of lace on there. And then we used the lines in this white fabric and did, a fern stitch right here in all of this white. Those are fern stitches going through there, and used the lines on that to make our stitches to follow, which is always a great idea. And then in between there, going down to section that off, is just some chain stitching. You can see that. And then we have a curly Q here that we just did in some beads that are attached. Try and get that up there so you can see that better. And those are just stitched down with some tack stitches like a running stitch. And we, oh, this is the one, yes, this fabric that is behind this piece of an old linen handkerchief, which has the flower in there, and that has just some stitching to hold it down, some added stitching on that going around it. But the fabric that's on the back had all kinds of little dots on it. So all of those dots are French knots that are going on top of the dots that are in the fabric. A lot of circles were in there and a lot of French knots. And then we have a button also on there for some embellishment. And then down in this corner, we've used a button that looks like a little flower center, and then have done like a pistol stitch. And instead of the French knots, we have put a bead on all of those. And then we have the stem stitch here for the stem and leaves going out on the flower. So that is an idea on how all of the stitching was done on that one. So there you have some examples on decorative stitching for some ideas and inspiration on what can be done on the page layouts that you have been doing in between our sessions here. And we will just show, I'm actually doing two of the journals that we are doing. This one doesn't have the stitches in it yet, but it does have a couple page layouts to show you. We have the center part on this one done, which is this page 4 and 5, which ends up being the center of the book. So I did it as one big layout on this. And in this book, I am staying with the creams, beiges, neutral colors, a little bit of brown. And so that is what you have in there. That looks gray, but that's actually brown up there. But again, we used some of the fabric with words on it. This is the center portion of a doily, and that is attached with a running stitch. We don't have any embellishment started on this yet. This is just basted down, and the yo-yos, that's what these are. A couple little yo-yos with some antique buttons, and the buttons are what's holding the yo-yos down on there. And then again, we have part of a doily, and we have an antique button. See if we can get some of the decoration on that. And we do have a little bit of stitching on this one. We have done a lazy daisy stitch that is on the actual design that was in the fabric there. There was a flower on there, so did the lazy daisy stitch around that, and there's some French knots in the middle. So it did get a bit of a start. And I believe that is, yeah, that is the only layout that I have so far in that one. But I did want to show you that some things that you might want to prepare is I have a little sparrow that I traced out, and I will have that to be able to include on a page layout when it just needs something a little extra. And we'll be doing the embroidery on that. It does have the SF 101 on the back, so that won't show through already, just to put on a page layout when I find a spot for that. And then we'll do the embroidery work when it is, well, we might do it before it's put on the page, but we'll have that to be able to add to a page. So that gives you some ideas on working on your page layouts. So now let's get to the embroidery stitches that we are going to be learning this week. And I will zoom back in for that. It as close as we can, so you will be able to see that. And you notice I have the bigger grid, and I am actually using crochet cotton and a larger needle so that you will be able to see the stitching better, hopefully. Hopefully we have this all planned out. But the first stitches that we are going to learn, they're very similar, so they are the same square. We're counting them as one stitch, even though they are two, and that is the stem stitch and the outline stitch. And the stem stitch is on page 40 of your little handbook. And we start on if you're right-handed, you start on the left side of your line or whatever you are stitching. Make sure I'm in the view there, which right there is my needle, and I'm coming up right on the end of my line. And for the first stitch, it's just a little bit different than the other because you have to get it started. And you're going to take a stitch over, and you are going to come up in the middle of that right on the line. So it is just like that. And that is your first stitch to get, and you notice the thread is to the bottom. That is what makes the difference between a stem stitch and an outline stitch. And the way to remember that is stem stitch. Think of the S stands for swing low. So that will remind you that on a stem stitch, your thread is always on the bottom, held to the bottom, swing low. So, and you have that first beginning stitch down, then you are going to go about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch over. And you are going to take your stitch and you are going to come up, not right in the same spot as what you went down in there, but just a little bit beyond it. If you can see, my needle is coming up just a little bit beyond that stitch. We don't want to come up in the same one that we just went down in. And this is going to end up making a spiral stitch. And that's what makes that. If you came up right in that hole, you're not going to get the spiral effect on it. So you come up and then you go down again, 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch over. You're coming up just a little past where you went down on that other stitch, keeping your thread always below your needle. And you just continue to do that all the way along your line or whatever it is that you are doing the stem stitch on. And that is what it is going to look like. Don't look at that one up there. That is the yeah, that's the outline stitch. It looks a little bit different. So we're just going 1/8 to 1/4 inch, coming up just beyond where we went down in our other stitch, coming up. It's a very, very easy stitch, used a lot. This is the stem stitch again, keeping that thread always below our needle. And because I'm using the Onsberg for fabric, so I could have the larger grid and a little larger needle and thicker thread, I just have to tug a little bit more at that thread than when you're using your normal embroidery floss. But hopefully it is allowing you to see better what I am doing, because the stitch isn't quite as small. Get back over here where we can see. We're just going to continue on the same way. Get that up, and you can see how that makes that little spiral effect on that stitch. It's fun to stitch along. You will find for a lot of lettering, you will use a stem stitch. Oops. And of course well, we've got our thread caught in there. There we go. On stems to flowers, you will use stem stitch a lot. On leaves, to outline them, you will use a stem stitch quite often. But it is one of the stitches you will find that you use a lot. And I hope that you are able to see this a lot better on what I am actually doing. And again, you always notice I use my thumb to control my stitches, holding the thread down out of the way. I also use it to guide my needle to come up where I want it to come up. I find I don't normally have to wear a thimble most of the time. Every once in a while I do, but most of the time I do not need a thimble when I am doing embroidery work. And I don't use a hoop unless I'm doing a really small project. I like to be able to get my hand in there and use it to control my stitches, and that's harder to do if you have it taught in a hoop. We're almost to the end of our line. I'll show you how you end that stitch when I get to the end there. Keeps catching my end of my thread in there. And if it doesn't come up quite where you want it, just pull back and make sure you get it where where you do want that needle coming up. We've got the tail of the thread in there again. And one more. You try and plan that so there's just, you're either right at the end or you have just a little bit left, because that last stitch, then you still want to make sure that your thread is at the bottom. And on that last stitch, you're just going to go right down and bring it to the back. And of course, I just run my stitches through some of the back so that I don't have to tie a knot. I just weave it through several of those stitches on the back. Oops. Got batting on the back of this. And I just went through my thread there. You don't want to do that. And scissors are over here on the other side. And then you can just cut that off close and you don't have to tie a knot. Okay, so now we are going to go on to the outline stitch. And we're going to do that on the line right below our stem stitch. Sorry about that. Sometimes it takes the camera just a little bit to focus in there. And we are going to do that in our lighter blue. So again, this is going to be a lot like the stem stitch. The difference is we are going to be keeping our thread on the top of our needle instead. And I'm coming in there right by my thumb, right at the end of my line again. My thread got caught in the little crevice of my sewing table there. Okay, we're over here. Make sure we get in the right place here. But this time you are going to keep the thread above or over top of the line for outline stitch, over the top. And you're going to do the same thing. You're going to start with a little longer stitch so you can come up halfway in the middle there for your first stitch, keeping that thread on top of your needle. That all the way through, and you're doing the exact same as what you're doing for your stem stitch, except I'm going to go on the underneath side, on the bottom side of that this time when I come up, instead of on the top of it. Keeping my thread on the top. And you are going to end up with a spiral that looks just a little bit different than the stem stitch. Okay, stop doing that thread. It's because it's long, but I don't want to have to stop and keep rethreading. So you're keeping that thread up there. You're taking your 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch, coming right past where you went down on the previous stitch. And if I pull my thread slower, we won't get it caught and all the way down. Always make sure you take that thread on the top, coming over from your last stitch, just a little ahead of where you came down, and pull it all the way through. And you notice you're getting a spiral again, but it is going a different direction than the stem stitch. So if you make a mistake, you will notice a difference in your stitching. And that is the only difference between an outline and a stem stitch. Most left-handed people will do an outline stitch as a stem stitch instead, but they're just making sure that they are keeping the loop side on the correct side of their work for where it needs to be, because they are working the opposite direction as someone that is right-handed. Just gonna go all the way across your line again, and that is the outline stitch. I do not use the outline stitch very frequently at all. I use the stem stitch a lot, but not the outline stitch. Letting you see closely how that stitch is done. Always making sure that it's on the top, down. And you just want to be consistent in the length of your stitches. And we won't finish the line on this one, since it's basically the same, just working with the thread on top of your needle instead. So there you have that, and I think they're close enough together there that if you look, you can see the difference in the spiral. They are not the same. Okay. So I'm going to finish that off because I will. Yep, I'm going to need this for our next stitch. I'm just going to the back, finishing off the same way that we did the other. Passing this through some of those stitches. And find my scissors laying underneath my work and just clip that off. Okay, so there, you learned 2 of the stitches already for this week. The stem stitch and the outline stitch. And the next stitch that we are going to learn is, and the outline stitch, by the way, was on page 40. Stem stitch was on page 58. The next stitch that we're going to learn is the split stitch, and it is on page 56. And we will just go to that, make sure that I start it off correctly. I'm going to turn my work and get to where we are on that one, which we're working that right up here on this line right here. This is the first one. That was as an example, but you are going to come up with your needle right at the end of your line or whatever it is that you're doing that stitch for in your pattern. Of course, you've got your knot in there, and about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch away, you're going to go straight down. This one, you just kind of have to keep going up and down. There's no easy way to do that in a fluid motion. And then you are going to come up in the middle of that stitch from the bottom, and you are going to, and it's hard because I'm trying to hold it there. Whoops, where am I? Sorry about that. You're going to come up in the middle of your thread. You're splitting your thread. You see where I have come up? That's why it's called the split stitch, because you're coming up in your thread, splitting the stitch, and then going straight back down the length that you were making your stitches. This one is a little tedious because you have to make sure that you are actually coming up in that thread, and your needle will want to go on either side of it instead of coming through it. So just play with it until you have your thread coming through the thread. You can see it's right in the middle there of my thread. Splitting that thread and then going down for your next stitch. And that is the split stitch. It can be used a lot in lettering also, and to outline things. But coming up again in right through your thread. Just continue through your whole line area or whatever it is you are stitching. Just want to make sure that you come down far enough, and see I missed the thread there. It looked like it's going on either side of it. There we go. Now we're through it. Well, I said that can be a little tedious to make sure you are getting and splitting that thread instead of going on either side of it. If you are using embroidery floss instead of pearl cotton or a one-stranded thread, it will be easier to do because you can split through the strands of your thread. I'm using crochet cotton, so it's only the one strand, so I'm having to split right through my thread to do this. This is a number size 10 crochet cotton, by the way, that I'm using for this larger stitch, so that you can, there it is, it's not through it. We are right to the side of it instead of coming through it. There we go. Not quite as hard when you're able to hold your work the way you normally do. I'm holding it at an odd angle so that I'm underneath the camera and so that you can see. So that's why I'm actually missing my spot every once in a while. But that is the split stitch, which is actually a very, very simple stitch. It can just be a little tedious, like I said, to make sure that you are actually splitting that thread, because your needle just automatically wants to go to either side of it instead of right straight through it. And that is what it ends up looking like. And we don't need to do any more of that. I think you get the idea on how that is done. So I'll finish it off also. I think I have enough thread still on here to be able to show you the next stitch. Our next stitch is going to be a colonial knot. It is a little bit harder to do than a French knot, just because it's a little awkward on the way that you have to hold your hand to do it. The stitch itself is not hard. It's just the way that you have to hold your hand to be able to do it. And a colonial knot, a lot of people wonder, okay, what is the difference between a colonial knot and a French knot? A French knot is just a true knot. You're wrapping your thread right around the needle. A colonial knot, you are actually doing a figure 8 with your thread to make the knot. And it is a little thicker knot that you get from it. And it is used, if you've ever done candle wicking, a colonial knot is what is used for candle wicking, which candle wicking is designs that are all dots on your fabric, and you are just doing, where am I? Can't find, okay, there we are. But I'm going to start down here with the first one, and I have some light dots on there, but just like a French knot, you're going to come up from the back in the middle of your dot, or just to the side of it. So you're bringing your, stuck in that, or the drawer comes out on my desk. Okay, so you're bringing your thread all the way up to the top. And then you are going to take, and you are going to hold that with your other hand. You are going to take your needle and you are going to swing it underneath your thread. You see how I did that? I'm swinging it underneath that thread. And then you're going to hold that with your finger. Can't get that up because I have to hold it down to be able to do it. You're going to take your tail and you are going to go over and around your needle. And when you look at that, if I can keep it there, you'll see how it forms a figure 8. See that? So you will hold that. You're going to get that fabric out of the way so you can see. You are going to put the tip of your needle right down next to where you came up. You're going to pull that knot down flush with the fabric. And again, you are going to hold that with your other finger as you pull slowly all the way through. And that is going to form your colonial knot. And you can see how that is a more substantial knot than what a French knot is. So we're going to come up in the next one. You're going to hold your thread. You're going to take your needle and you're going to swing it underneath. And you're going to hold that with your finger. You're going to take your thread, wrap it around over the top of your needle, forming a figure 8. And then you just go back down, bring that flush down, make sure that you hold it. You have to get your other hand underneath there. So you're holding that with my thumb over here. You're holding that taut while you slowly pull your thread through, letting go with your other finger right when you get to it, and you form the perfect little knot. And that is your colonial knot. They are a little slower to do than a French knot, just because, like I said, that awkward little way that you have to, and once you get used to it, you'll get to where you can swing that needle a lot faster through there, but it does take a little bit longer than than a French knot. So we're just coming up there, trying to do that. Look to make sure I've still got the angle in the camera at the same time. It's a little hard. You just swing your needle under that, wrap it over the top of your needle, put your needle right next to where you came up, down, pull it taut with the top of your fabric. I'm holding that down with my finger while I get the other one back over here to hold that. You don't want to let go of that. And the trick is to pull your thread slowly back through and let go at the last minute when you get to that, and you will have your colonial knot. Pulling it out, taking my needle, swinging it right underneath, then hold it, come over the top for your figure 8, put it back down, get it flush, grab it with your other hand, and if you don't have as much fabric to get your other hand under there, you don't have as much as a problem as I'm having right now either. Not normally working with, a piece of fabric this big when you're doing embroidery. This is quite large, so that I had a bigger display area to be able to show you the stitches. Hopefully you are able to see this better than the small grid that I was working on. And we'll do one more, and then we will go on to our next stitch, which is the last stitch for part 5. Holding that out, swinging the needle underneath the thread, figure 8 over the top, right next to where you came up. Hold that down. And pull it slowly through. And there we have our beautiful colonial knots. So not as difficult as you may think, but just a little awkward with the hand positioning for them. But they make a beautiful, beautiful knot. Like how that's doing that. So I am going to make a little knot here to make sure that my thread is held there. Okay, our next stitch is, I will be honest, my most unfavorite stitch in embroidery. I do not like this stitch at all. I avoid it at all costs. I will use an alternate way of doing it than doing a satin stitch, which is what our next stitch is, because I just do not like satin stitch. And I have done half of a one here to show you, and I'm going to do the other half to show you how that is done. And the satin stitch is found on page 48 in your little handbook. And a lot of people do not realize that you are supposed to actually outline the area that you are doing your satin stitch first. And that is what makes your satin stitch stay in the area that it is supposed to and stand up nicely on your fabric. But we're going to switch over to the other thread here. We might run out, we'll see, but we'll at least get it started with this. So the first thing I have done is I have gone, and this is just with a back stitch. I outlined the oval that I am working on, and then kind of start in the middle, which was a little off the middle, but work from the middle to that way. So now we're going to work from the middle to this way, and we are going to come up on the outside. Get the camera there on the outside, and again I can't see at this angle, on the outside of our outline stitch that we did. Oh, and I just unthreaded my needle. That was not nice because it's stuck in that crack again. Okay, so now we have to, that one's not going to work. I have to get the other needle threader. There we go. Need a little bigger slot to get this thread through. Okay. Sorry about that. And you do not, the trick on your satin stitches, you do not want to tug and pull that tight. So we've got that on the outside of our stitch that we used for outlining that. We are going to come down right next to where our last stitch was, and we are going to go straight down. And you are going to use your other finger to guide your thread to go right where you want it. And again, do not pull that tight. And then you're going to come back up at your top, right next to your last stitch. See how close I am to that other stitch, right on the outside of my outline stitch. Oops. And we just pulled that. Okay. Making sure I've got my thread. If you pull that a little too tight, just loosen it up before you continue on. And then we are going to come down again right next to our stitch. And pull that all the way down and use your finger to guide that thread to lay where you want it to lay. Satin stitch also uses a lot of thread. We're coming up right next to that again on the outside of the part that we outlined. Coming down at the bottom, going right next to our stitch, staying on the outside of our outlined area. And using our finger to guide our thread where we want it to go. And you continue to do that, trying to make sure you keep your stitches straight so that you don't get things going at an angle. You want it going straight unless you are purposely trying to go at an angle. Sometimes you can do that for a decorative effect, like in a leaf or something. You might want to do it at a diagonal. Just whatever your area is, you would do this until the whole complete area is filled. I don't know the name of the stitch offhand that I like to use instead, but it is basically, it ends up looking like a satin stitch, but it's a lot lot easier to do. You start in the middle of whatever you are doing again, but you alternate going on either side of your your stitch, and it just lays nicer. It's just easier to do. And I don't know offhand what that is actually called. I think it starts with an F, but not sure. I will get that information for you. Sorry, I cannot see my fabric at that angle. Coming out a little too far past my outline. There we go. See my needle. I try and move it so you know where I am there. But that is your satin stitch. Like I said, you just keep doing that until you have filled the entire area that your pattern, or if it's just what you are doing in your head, doing something, do you have the whole area filled? And I do not have enough thread to finish this section off. And I don't think I'm going to do another stitch, because if I do, I won't have enough to finish it off on the back. So I'm just going to come through some of my stitches on the back here, running through those ones that are my outline stitch on the edge instead of the satin ones, because you could end up pulling those together. You don't want to do that. So, and I put my scissors back over here. But that is your satin stitch. You will not see me use that one very often at all. Just, I will admit and be honest, I do not like satin stitch. So on smaller things, it comes out better than larger areas, I think, but there you have it. So we have learned the stem stitch and the outline stitch for our first two. Remember the stem stitch, you're doing the stitch, keeping your thread below your needle, and on the outline, you're doing it with it over top of your needle. Stem is, yeah, swing low to remember, and outline is on top or over your needle. So that is the difference between the two stitches. And then the split stitch was just a straight stitch. When you came up, you are actually splitting the thread and coming through and going down. Each time you come up, you're splitting your thread. And that just, it makes a little denser stitch than what your back stitch or a running stitch would be. A straight stitch, I mean, not a running stitch. There's a space between a running stitch. So, but so it could be used in a lot of things, the same as a back stitch if you want a little denser stitch. And then our next stitch was the colonial knot, which is doing that figure 8 with your thread instead of just wrapping it around the tip of the needle. And then last, I was going to say not least, but least in my opinion, is the satin stitch. So those are the stitches that you have for part 5 of your hand embroidery slow stitching journal, and your grid that you have in that. So next week we will also, well, not next week, hopefully this week, because we are behind since I had to cancel and reschedule part 5. Let me get this out of the way and we'll bring this back down instead. Something a little, oops, little better to see underneath there, which I guess I could actually change our camera and say hello while I am here. It'll take just a minute for it to switch over. Here I am. But yes, hello. So, um, to get us back on track and back on schedule, because we do have a total of 28 stitches that we are learning in this, and we don't want it to take forever. The way that I have it planned out, it should be the first week in July. That would be our last part in the learning of the stitches. So, so that it doesn't drag out any longer. Hopefully, I will find the time this week yet to get part 6 of the embroidery slow stitching journal in. Also, I'm thinking that will probably be scheduled as a premiere to come out on Friday. Um, have other things going on Thursdays and Saturdays. So, yeah, I believe it will be Friday because I will not have time. This is Monday for me that this was taped. It will You are seeing it on Tuesday. So to try and do another one, so it is on Wednesday. I do not think I will be able to do that. So part 6 should come out on Friday at 5 o'clock as a premiere, the same as these. Did I say part 5? I meant part 6 if I didn't say that correctly. And there will be, I do believe, it will probably be 4 stitches again that will be taught then, and we'll actually hopefully be doing some of the embroidery stitches on a page to demonstrate and show that also in part 6. If you have any questions or anything or something that you would like to be shown more in any of the episodes coming up, just let me know in the comments and I will see what I can do to do that for you. So thank you, everyone. Have a great week. I will hopefully see you in the chat on Friday for part 6. And remember, in the meantime, I can keep you in stitches. Bye-bye, everyone.